coffee house in Redmond, Washington. All of those of you who are here on this lovely first Wednesday of the summer evening, and as Kevin said, the last Wednesday of the month. And welcome to all of those of you who are out there in cyberspace, the 30 or 40,000 people a month that come to the Soul Food Night through the magic of technology. So, I normally spend the first few minutes talking about my upcoming events, and yet I've been running around so much the first part of 2017 that I'm actually coming into a stretch where I don't have anything to report. I mean, there will be other things this later on this fall, and next year is already for me kind of filling up with a workshop in Bali and one in India, or a conference in India, and the big mother, the grandmother of all astrology conferences, next Memorial Day weekend, the last weekend in May in Chicago, the United Astrology Conference, of which I will be one of some 150 speakers from around the world, and the Northwest Astrology Conference, which I know several of you go to every year. Next year will be in March rather than in May because it will be preempted by this bigger, badder, meaner, leaner United Astrology Conference that will be in May. So NORWAC next year will be in March. And I just said I wasn't going to tell you about anything coming up, and I did, but welcome to my world. One of the things that people don't understand about astrology, or many people don't understand about astrology, is that it's not mechanical. There is a mechanical side to it, but it's not mechanical. In fact, there's an ongoing discussion in the astrological world as to whether astrology is an art or a science. And for many of you who know stuff about how the brain works, you know that the right hand, which is the mechanically oriented, male-dominated hand, is connected with the left brain, which is about science. It's about mechanical cause and effect and those kinds of relationships. The left hand, it's interesting because we have such a cultural judgment that the right hand in Latin is dexter, and to be ambidextrous is cool because you have two right hands, but the left hand is sinister or sinistre. And same in the other romantic languages, and it's not good to be double sinister. But the point to this little etymological detour is that the left hand connected to the right brain is more about the yin, the feminine, the intuitive. It might be said that the left hand, right brain is art, where the right hand, left brain is science. Now, is astrology science or art? I would suggest to you that astrology holds a very peculiar place. And that is, wait a minute, here comes my coffee. Thank you, Jordan. Excuse me. Yum. We are at a coffee house. I would suggest to you that astrology is, on one hand, both left brain and right brain, both science and art. But I would suggest even a step further that astrology is actually the corpus callosum. Now, the corpus callosum, for those of you who know physiology, you know that the two hemispheres function separately and independently. One is spatially oriented and the other is temporally oriented. One is yang, masculine, the other is yin, feminine. But there's this bridge between them that connects the two of them and makes the brain work as an integrated whole. And that's WHOLE. And just as an aside, Not only is astrology the corpus callosum, the thing that connects the science and the art, the space and the time, if you will. I should also note that physiologically, if size matters, that women have larger corpus callosums than men. All right. So, although there is a mechanical side to astrology, people can look at the same mechanics and have different experiences. And what we try to do here each month, once a moon, 28, 29 days, is we look at where the planets are today, tomorrow, next week, and for the entire month. We're now looking at July of 2017, and even though none of us in this room have yet been in July of 17, it's mechanical to know where the planets will be on any given day. This is the mechanical side of astrology. So we can predict, for example, that there will be a full moon on July 8th, or that there will be a new moon on July 23rd. These are mechanical predictions. There's no question that these planets moving in their paths will be in those spots. That's where the mechanical side ends and the artistic or intuitive and or generalizing principle side comes in, and that is, what does it mean? And of course, this is the primary difference between astronomy and astrology, that it's been said that astronomy is like a glove, and that astrology is the animating force, the hand inside the glove. So astronomy is mechanical. It names things. It understands their movements and their orientation and their evolution. But astrology tries to relate that to experience. And of course, here's where it gets interesting, because each and every one of us is on a different trajectory. Yes, we share pieces of our trajectories, both culturally, socially, romantically, familially. We share these pieces of our trajectory, even the fact that we're all living in approximately, whether you're 19 years old or 79 years old, we're living in a shared time and from a shared political perspective here on the planet. So we have a lot of shared stuff. But the thing is that when we look at where the planets are going to be day by day and week by week for the month ahead, for the month of July, we have to understand that what might be a really good day for someone might be a really bad day for someone else. And so we're going to try to avoid these good, bad labels. And I tried to do that. I slipped like everyone else does, because I have my perspectives, my opinions, my value judgments. But the fact is, and I've said this before from this stage, that if you had your suntan lotion and your swimming trunks on, and or as our friends in Oz call them, your swimmers, and you took your suntan lotion and headed to the beach, if it wasn't sunny, you'd be bummed because it was a bad day. On the other hand, if you were a duck, probably your favorite days are those overcast, rainy days, because the damn humans aren't there. And so all I'm saying is that the same external weather actually has very different experiences depending upon what we're bringing to that experience. You with me? All right. So here we are at the beginning of July 2017. Actually, today is June 28th. And we start off with a chart of where the planets are here today. And and I need to change something right away here because just hang on, bear with me here a second. That should have been this. I'm not sure how that got tweaked. And now we go to, come on. And now we go to we're going to go right to July 1st, 17. There we are. And what we're looking at, for those of you who are new, I know that there are people who know a lot of astrology and people who don't know as much astrology or any at all. From this perspective, I would say to those of you who are not familiar with the technical side of astrology, let the things you don't understand wash over. There'll be plenty of English language words in between some of the technical things. But what we're looking at here is a map that's showing this point as 0 degrees of Aries. This is the start of the astrological zodiac. This is not a horoscope that shows the horizon, which changes hour by hour, which we would do if we were looking at an individual chart. This is a mundane chart. This is a chart, in effect, for the world. And so we've taken out the horizon, and we've just said Aries, Taurus, Gemini. That way we have some consistency. What we do know, what I see as I look at this chart, is this red triangle here, which stands out for me because I've looked at these things enough. I know what to look for. And this red triangle involves the Sun, Mars, and Mercury in the sign of Cancer, opposite Pluto in Capricorn, and all 90 degrees to Jupiter, and actually today the moon also, Jupiter in Libra. And this is going to be our starting point for talking about why the last week or so, and why the next week or so, and a lot of the time coming up through July, has a lot of intensity that is familiar and is hearkening back to some of the changes that did or didn't happen over the last few years. Now, for those of you, how many here are for the first time here? Okay. Well, for those of you who are here for the first time, this is something that I've been talking about from this stage for probably about 7 or 8 years now. And that is that in the early 2010s, 2012 through 15 exactly, but in this period of time, we've had a slow-moving square, a 90-degree angle between Uranus in the sign of Aries. Here, Uranus is at 28 degrees of Aries. Uranus in Aries, square to Pluto in Capricorn. Now, this is no longer an exact aspect. In fact, we can go 18 plus 10 is 28. They're 10 degrees away from being exact, and that is opening. It's getting more and more and more. However, these slow-moving planets hold positions that become resonant. And in fact, we can go back to the mid-60s when Uranus, the planet of shock, surprise, awe, revolution, electrical awakening, when Uranus in the mid-1960s was lined up at the same place in the sky as Pluto, the lord of the underworld, suppressed and repressed and hidden stuff, power, control, money, plutocracy, the rule by the wealthiest. Why wealth had to do with owning minerals, things that were underground. And so when Uranus and Pluto lined up in the mid-60s, there was a lot of release of these deeper, more symbolic archetypal energies that came out. And of course, good news and bad news through that period of time. But the issues that came to the forefront during that period of time never really went away, and they didn't start then. But there were huge issues in the mid-late 60s, and there were issues of the second wave of feminism. There were issues of political control, anti-war movement, civil rights, gender rights, ecological issues, the freedom of controlling one's own psyche, whether it was through psychedelics and marijuana then, or whether it's through psychedelics or marijuana now, that the issues of the mid-60s kind of drifted away, but they never really went away. And through the early 2010s, all of a sudden, kapow, they were all back on us. I mean, like huge back on us. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this again tonight is even though technically the Uranus-Pluto square, which resonates back to the mid-60s Uranus-Pluto conjunction, even though Uranus is the faster moving planet and it's moving away from the square, the thickness of these lines is basically how exact the geometry is. So you can see that there's still a square, but instead of being 90 degrees, it's 90 degrees plus 10, it's 100 degrees. So it's not exactly right on. The reason why we're talking about it, though, is that we have 1, 2, 3 planets moving through the sign of Cancer. These are faster moving planets. You see, Uranus takes 84 years to go around once. Pluto takes some 243 years to go around once. Meanwhile, the Sun and Mercury go through all the signs every year, and Mars takes, we could say 2 years, not quite 2 years, to go through the signs. So these guys here, I say guys because I guess they really all are guys. They're the Sun, Mars, and Mercury. Well, Mercury technically isn't a guy. Mercury is a hermaphrodite, so Mercury is gender independent. Can use whatever bathroom it likes. Okay, so the Sun, Mars, and Mercury are all moving relatively quickly compared to Pluto and Uranus that barely move at all. I mean, they move slowly. Uranus has been in the sign of Aries for 7 years. It moves out of Aries into Taurus next year. Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008, and it won't move out of Capricorn until 2021-ish, right in there into Aquarius. So the thing that's important, though, is that 4 times a year, the faster moving planets, which sometimes travel in clusters, they don't always, the Sun and Mercury and Venus can't get too far apart from each other because we're on Earth looking at the Sun and they're going around the Sun. And so when we look toward the Sun, they're going to be in our field of vision. Mars every other year is in the same field of vision. But what this means is that as these faster moving planets are traveling around the Sun faster than the slow moving Uranus and Pluto, that 4 times a year, they're going to fall into a spot that is exactly opposite either Pluto or Uranus, and or 90 degrees to one or the other, and or lined up with it. If you think of like a big square in the sky, Uranus and Pluto right now are on 2 points, on 2 sides of this grand square. Can you see this kind of sloppy, kind of 90 degrees, 90 degrees about? Can you see what I'm talking about here? So every time the faster moving planets, meaning in particular the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, move into one of those points, they're going to re-stimulate, they're going to re-energize the same issues that keep coming back and back and back and back again and again and again. Who said that? You're in trouble. Okay. Now, we add to the mix Jupiter, which is not quite as slow as these Sirius outer planet 84-year, 250, 243-year cycles. But Jupiter takes 12 years to go around. So Jupiter spends an entire year in a sign, which means that it's only every 3 years when Jupiter will reach a point where it is opposite or lined up with or square to one of these 2 planets, Uranus and Pluto in this particular case. And what we're looking at right now is Jupiter in the sky moving through Libra. Forget about the moon, because the moon moves so fast that it's back there every 30 days, having gone all the way around. So we're just looking at Jupiter for a moment, because Jupiter spends an entire year moving through Libra, and right now Jupiter is moving close toward coming into a square with Pluto. It will eventually oppose Uranus, but all these faster moving planets are squaring it also. And this is where the month opens, and this is why this pattern is so important, because there's larger global, social, economic issues that have not gone away, and they're not going away yet. They're too big, they're too intense, they're too powerful, they're too historic for them just to be a Thursday afternoon event. We all have issues in our lives that something happens on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday we've forgotten about it. But then there are things that happen on certain days. September 11th, 2001. It's 16 years later, and we still remember that day. So, but even that event happened in a moment. It was a moment. We're now looking at an event, astrologically, that happened through the 60s into the early 70s, and then kind of receded a bit into the shadows, into the backstage, where it was rehearsing its lines and getting shit together. And now, that's back out in the forefront again. But even though the exact square between revolutionary, futuristic Uranus and powerful, controlling, evolutionary, transformational Pluto, even though this square is a done deal, meaning it was exact because of the movement of Earth inside these slower moving planets, the perspective made it be exact 7 times from 2012 through 2015. It's no longer exact. It's getting weaker. However, just like the hottest day of the year isn't the longest day of the year, we just had the summer solstice here in the northern hemisphere, and it's more sunlight on that day than any other day in the year. But the hottest day of the year typically isn't until July or even August or sometimes even early September because of this whole time it takes for things to catch up. So, even though the exact square of Uranus and Pluto are a done deal, we have other planets coming in and out of that pattern that rattle that cage again and again and again. And the end of June on through July is another time when we're getting another wave of this. And certainly the saber rattling that the United States is doing with, I was going to say Syria, but I'll say with the entire world, with the shenanigans going on in the Capitol, I'm thinking this week, in reference to a Democratic government trying to pass a major piece of legislation in secret as if we were some sort of dictatorship where we, the people, were not to be considered, not to be included in the process. And I can feel the internet land already. I spend a fair amount of my time each month going through my YouTube channel and trying to be nice to people who have different opinions than I do, because I welcome that. But you got to be nice. If you're gonna put something on my YouTube page, I don't care what you believe in. It's like you're having dinner at my house. Be nice. And so it's okay to disagree with me. And I've had a lot of people, some of you have heard this before, I've taken a lot of flack online of people saying, you're an astrologer, you need to leave your opinions out of this. And my position is that every astrologer has an opinion. Most of them will not own up to it in public, and they make it sound like they're neutral, but you can't be. I mean, I try to be as neutral as I can, but the fact of the matter is I certainly have my opinions. Okay, didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but then again, I don't mean to go down it every fucking month, and I do. Yeah. So, So the stuff that's coming up now and the fervor of which these issues are in front of us are not out of place astrologically, because not only are the Sun, Mercury, and Mars, I mean, we have actually today, June 28th, we have Mercury exactly lined up with Mars. If I back this up just a couple of days, change this from hours to days and back that up to today. There, you can see that Mercury and Mars are both at 15 degrees of Cancer. They're exact. But you see, what happens is that Mercury's moving faster than Mars. So as we move this a day at a time, Mercury will catch up to Mars. It'll become in front of Mars. There it is right there. And then Mercury will be actually opposite Pluto, exact, and then past that. And then Mars still takes another couple of days for it to come in and be exactly opposite Pluto. All right, you with me here? So what the hell does this mean? Where's the art? Now we've seen the mechanics. Pluto is about control. Pluto is about power that's not necessarily always on the surface. It's the unconscious. It's not the stuff we suppress, because if you suppress something, you know you're doing it. It's the stuff we repress, which is absolutely invisible. If someone says, oh yeah, I'm repressing that, they're lying. Because you can't know that you're repressing something. Repression is unconscious. So Pluto is the unconscious. It's that powerful stuff that happens in the dark. It's the hidden stuff. And as we have Mercury, the planet of communication, today on June 28th, lined up exactly with Mars, the forceful planet, the warrior planet. You get tough talking. You get kind of this using intellect to force something through. You get kind of this push. And in fact, it's very possible and probable even for us to get involved in conversations yesterday, today, tomorrow, where the energy gets out of control because something becomes more than what it really is. Because we get all worked up because Mars is inflammatory. Mars is hot. Mars is adrenaline. Mars is action. Mars is fire. You know, Mars is the angry red planet. Why is it angry and red? Because it's made of iron that's oxidizing, which is a slow burning. It is angry and red. And so we have Mercury, the intellect, lining up with Mars, and we have words of hostility that are easily said. But it's Mercury opposing Pluto, which is exact, I think, tomorrow, it's on the 30th, I think. We need to back this up again. Whoop. Slow down. Jeez. Reality, run away. All right. So Mercury is exactly opposite Pluto on the 29th, 30th. I don't have the exact time because I've only run July rather than June, but it's the end of June that Mercury is opposite Pluto. And what does that mean? It means that there's a power struggle over information. It means that there is data that is logical, that is communication, that is bumping up against a hidden agenda. And then, as we move this forward a day at a time, then Mars comes into that picture, and now we're on July 2nd exactly, when on July 2nd, Mars is exactly opposite Pluto. Now again, you can see that these degrees are very close. We're already in it now. June 28th, 29th, 30th. Then on into July 1st, 2nd, 3rd. All of these are going to be tied up within the same energy. And what is the energy when Mars comes opposite Pluto? Not nice. Now, it can be very powerful. In a relationship, this can be incredibly juicy and powerful if two people have respect for one another. But when Pluto, the planet of control, does battle with Mars, who's like just pissed off, this is not an easy energy. And we see this unfolding right now on the political spectrum in the United States. And again, I have very definite, opinions about all of this. But what I'm saying here is, what's the word I'm looking for? Exo-opinion. What's beyond? It's not about my opinion. It's just about the fact that right now, this week, Mercury, the planet of communication, Mars, the planet of anger and of offense and defense, the warrior planet, is opposite Pluto, the planet of plutocracy. Plutocracy, or sometimes called an oligarchy, is a government that's run by the wealthy. And so this is what the astrological signature is, and you bring into it the square from Jupiter, which is still building. Jupiter doesn't reach its exact point of squaring Pluto until, I got the dates here that I ran because these are slower moving rhythms. And Pluto, the Jupiter to Pluto, no, I don't have it. This is one of those aspects that moves in and out of phase over the course of weeks, of months. And that Jupiter doesn't really become exactly square to Pluto again until closer on until August. So it's out of our range exactly. But look, it's still only 4 degrees away. And when you're talking about planets that have cycles of a couple of centuries, 4 degrees or a month away really is nothing. It's still, it's like enough in tune that it's working. So what does Jupiter do to this? Jupiter is the magnifying lens. Jupiter is the planet of bigger and better and more and too much. Jupiter is the planet of opinions. Jupiter is the planet of the idea of beliefs that override reality. It's instead of seeing is believing, it's the Wayne Dyer line, believing is seeing. And so what we have is this pattern that is set up in the beginning of this month that is very strong and will be with us for the first week of the month. But even still beyond, when Mercury and Mars move away from this exact opposition to Pluto, before they change signs and move into Leo, and I'll give you dates here in a minute, I'm just trying to give you the big picture of the month. But as Mercury and Mars move away and toward Leo, they will both square Uranus. Now you see, Pluto and Uranus, 18 degrees and 28 degrees, there's about 10 degrees from them being exact square. So each of these planets are coming in and first opposing Pluto, that's the power struggle, and then they're squaring Uranus, and that's the lightning striking. So we can expect that the things that are being set up now, and we can look at the political situation. I don't want to dwell on that. But you can also look at the situation in your own lives. You can look at your own financial situation. You can look at your family situation. You can look at your relationship issues. And you can see that these things that are happening now that are dredging stuff out and into the open, which may or may not be pleasant. But when something is in the open, you can deal with it. You can't oppose a health plan if you don't know what it is. But if it's out in the open, and again, I'm talking American politics, you now can make an informed position about it. And of course, it was Pluto in this that was the driving factor behind, if we keep this secret, we could just pass the bill before anyone knows what we did. Regardless of whether you're for it or against it. That's not my issue right here. My issue is simply how this becomes manifest out there. But here's the thing. Mercury and Mars will both square to Uranus. We'll talk about that date in just a moment. But then as we move this forward, the Sun over the next week, because the Sun moves about 1 degree a day. Not exactly, but bless you. But there's 365 days in a year and 360 degrees in a circle. So we can calculate the sun's movement at about a degree a day, which means that in about 7 days from July 2nd, around July 9th, that the sun will be exactly opposite Pluto. And I will imagine that by that sun opposition to Pluto, that Congress will be back in session and we'll have the next wave of what all of this fiasco is that's going on there. All right. Okay, before we move away from this, and again, in a few minutes, we'll look at the timing of how these planets, which are now opposing Pluto, will eventually square Uranus, and we'll look at that. But there's two other things I want to talk about, and one of them is this relationship that we have between Jupiter and Neptune. Now, this is something also we've talked about in months past. That green line between Jupiter and Neptune is denoting a geometry that is 5/12 of a circle. 5 in Latin is quinc. 12 is unx. The technical word for this aspect is a quincunx. 5/12. And astrologically, a quincunx is very different than a square. These Jupiter squares that we talked about, squares are tension, stress that needs to be resolved creatively, dynamically. When you're arguing with someone, that's a square. We even use the word, we squared off. I mean, that's what the geometry means. An opposition is like a tug of war. An opposition is exactly that. I'm opposed to it. Or this is opposed to that. It's like being in the middle with a tug of war, which is certainly what's going on. And interestingly enough, the planets in Cancer is the sign of nurturing. It's the sign of home and family and homeland and taking care of those you love. Capricorn is the sign of government and structure. So, all right. So back to this quincunx, that Jupiter is not only tied up in this kind of dynamic grand square, if you will, but Jupiter is exactly, 14 degrees, it's a quarter of a degree off. That quincunx becomes exact on July 4th. We can move this ahead to July 4th, and there it is, there it's 14:9 to 14:11, and there it is past the point. So you can see how that becomes the exact point. A quincunx is not about resolving tension. In fact, a quincunx is the annoying things in your life that you never can fix. It's like the mosquito in the tent. You can't find it. You can't make it go away. You can't go to sleep, and you're too tired to stay awake. A quincunx is the aspect of adjustment, because you're always trying to fine-tune it and make the adjustment to make it right, but you can't quite get it right because those two planets can't see each other. They can't bring each other into enough. If you have a square, you know where you stand and where your opponent stands, and you're arm wrestling or arguing or fighting. That's engagement. But a quincunx kind of eludes engagement because you can't really get a fix on one another. So what are the two planets involved here? Well, Jupiter is the expansive planet. Jupiter is bigger, better, more, too much, like I said earlier. But the thing about Jupiter is that it's inside the orbit of Saturn, and Saturn is the limit. So Jupiter, even though it's expansive, can only expand so far. So Jupiter becomes the planet of philosophy, because that's expanded thinking. Jupiter becomes the planet of opinions, because those aren't the facts. That's where we take the facts to when we think about them. Jupiter is the planet that's associated with travel, with going somewhere far away. It's not the planet that would be associated with driving back and forth over the 520 between Redmond and Seattle. That, incidentally, would be Mercury, because there's a back and forth energy. Jupiter's about the long haul. It's going far. It's the foreign powers, the foreign countries. It's foreign languages. It's people from far away. It's big ideas, and it's things that make us kind of go outside of our normal realm. However, Jupiter always is contained by the reality of Saturn. Are you with me? Neptune, on the other hand, is exactly like Jupiter, except it's escaped from Saturn. It's out past Saturn, which means that Jupiter is like a balloon. You have a balloon, you can only blow it up to Saturn. And if you blow it up too far, it explodes, it pops, it loses its integrity. Neptune, on the other hand, because it's already escaped from the need to answer to Saturn's structure, continues to expand indefinitely. Well, what's that? What expands indefinitely? Huh? The universe. How about our imagination? It's no longer philosophy, it's our dreams. It's that part of us that does not answer to the rules, to the structure, to the limits, to the laws. Because Jupiter is about jurisprudence. Jupiter relates to the judgment that's made when you take whatever's going on and you put it up against the rule. Neptune says, don't give a shit about a rule, because I'm so far outside of a box that I'm not going to expand. I'm going to disperse forever. I'm going to be infusive everywhere. So Neptune is like God. Now, I'm not saying that you all get to have your own personal definition of God or goddess, or whether there is one or not. That's not what I'm addressing. The idea, though, that there is something that is dispersed through everything in the universe, that's Neptune. Neptune is the seas of consciousness. Neptune is the ocean of the universe. Everything comes out of this kind of primordial soup, and we crystallize into these meat bodies, and we have these experiences that we call life, and we think it's the most important thing ever, and it's just a blink of a second in the grand scheme of things, and then we somehow melt back into the primordial ooze. That's Neptune. All right, so that's the mechanics. What's the art? What happens when the planet of philosophy and of big ideas and of opinions, what happens when that planet comes into a point of perspective with the planet of dreams, imagination, confusion, delusion, and spirituality, and can't recognize each other? Fake news. No, we have this this idea that we don't know what the truth is. You know, anyone who knows what's going on doesn't. Period. You know, even if you sound like you do. You know, even if you're me. Even if you're Rachel Maddow. You know, I don't care. It's like all we can do is look at what we think are facts and tell a story. And when Jupiter is quincunx to Neptune, the big ideas, the philosophies, the thoughts, the big picture, Jupiter, is impossible. It's impossible to find the truth because it's dancing in this confusing, not quite able to bring it into vision dance with Neptune, the planet of dreams, illusions, and everything that is outside of the realm of the material universe. So, this quincunx between Jupiter and Neptune is one of these aspects. Often with slower moving aspects, we get them 3 times. It's like the 3 strikes and you're out concept. Because what happens is that the planets come into this exact geometry, but the Earth is moving around, so it looks like one of them moves backwards and away from it, doesn't really. And then we get it a second and then a third time. This is a very common dance when we look at these outer planet transits. And so this Jupiter-Neptune quincunx was exact for the first time in the middle end of October. The date here it was October 23rd. But there's something here about the fuzziness already happening. Then Jupiter turns retrograde. The second of the 3 times was May 17th, just a month and a half ago. And the third of the 3 times will be July 4th. What that means is that we won't really begin to gain clarity on what the hell's been going on until we get some distance from this quincunx, which we will get through the latter part of July on into August, September, October. And of course, and I think this is called foreshadowing, we also have a very powerful pair of eclipses and a total solar eclipse that will be visible from Central Oregon here in the middle of August. August 21st, I think, is the exact date. And we'll see a lot of this stuff kind of falling or kind of, going one way or another around that period of time. But I'm trying to paint a picture for this month. So we have this grand square that's getting activated, stirring up all the stuff that we've been in and out of now for 4 or 5 years or so, 5, 6 years even. We have this kind of fuzzy quincunx between Jupiter and Neptune saying, what the hell's going on? I don't know. Do you? Yeah. No, you don't. Okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is this trine between, this is a narrower line because Saturn is a 30-year cycle, 29 years. And this trine between Saturn and Uranus also 3 times. The first time was around Christmas 2016. The second time was mid-May, about 6 weeks ago. And the third time will be November 11th coming up. And so this is not exact now, but we're still in the midst of this whole piece of Saturn, the planet of stability. Saturn, the planet of karma. You get what you deserve. Saturn, the planet of cause and effect. Saturn, the planet of authority, is basically harmonizing with Uranus, the planet of out of the box. The planet of erratic, the planet of unpredictable. And incidentally, I've said this from this podium before, and that is without making any judgment. I mean, the sun lines up with Uranus for a couple of days every year. Donald Trump was born during or at a full moon eclipse while the sun was lined up with Uranus. And so we have that sense of the Uranian. I mean, Uranus is genius. It's electric. It's brilliant when it's brilliant. But it's like lightning. It's either striking and it's awesome, or it's not and it's dark. There's no in between. And so as Saturn harmonizes with Uranus, we get a little bit of control, Saturn, around some of the edgier stuff, Uranus. And again, this began last year, a few weeks before inauguration, presidential inauguration here. It was exact the second time, May 18th, within 1 day of the special counsel being appointed. That was Saturn. In some ways, restraining and or working with Uranus. And again, I'm not making a value judgment on who's right or wrong here. But I am saying that by November, when Saturn trines that Uranus for the third and final time, we will be moving into a new phase. And for those of us who think that whether we want the Russia thing to go away because it's a hoax, or whether we want it to, kind of come to fruition and get who we think might be, crooks out of the White House, whatever side we're on, we're not going to have resolution on this until we get that third wave of the reality of the stability and the authority of Saturn harmonizing for the third and final time with Uranus. Got it? Okay. So those are the macro things for the month, because these are the issues that the day-to-day things that are happening kind of fall into. They're the things that kind of define the larger landscape or planetscape, if you will. But as we move this a day at a time, so I wanted to talk about Mercury. Here's July. Oh, let's back this up a bit. On July 4th, Mercury actually reaches toward the end of Cancer, and on July 4th, Mercury squares Uranus. Mercury squares Uranus. So this is a bit of, we'll see some stuff happening. That's information. Mercury coming out lightning-like. That's Uranus. On the same day, Venus, which we haven't talked about, Venus is kind of lagging way behind the sun right now. And she's hanging out in Taurus, where she likes to hang out because Venus is the planet of Taurus. And Venus is sensual, and Taurus is earthy and physical. But on July 4th, Venus moves from Taurus into Gemini. And here we pick up the mental, intellectual energy a little bit more, perhaps complacency, or those people who have been silent or not involved as as Venus moves into Gemini, there may be more communication about what the feeling is this good, is this not good? And I'm not here talking about just presidential politics. I'm talking about everything in our lives, even, individual relationships. July 4th will be a big day because not only does Venus change signs into Gemini, Mercury is square to Uranus, but that's the exact day of Jupiter quincunxing Neptune. When you look at these very slow-moving planets, sometimes it's not the exact day that the exact event happens on, because it's really that has been in effect since the middle of May and will be through the middle of July or so. But I think we can expect some more confusion in some ways to come out. And also, let me just throw into this, there's this whole, threat of a total diversion of military might going on right now in the Mideast that is beyond what most of us might realize is going on. And this is very much indicative of these planets opposing Pluto. And now we're going to follow that Mars, that it opposes Pluto, which I already talked about on July 2nd. But if we follow the Sun, remember it moves a degree a day roughly, and by July 9th, July 9, 10, that the Sun is exactly opposite Pluto. And you can see how by now Mercury has moved on into Leo. Let's back this up again a little bit. Oh, come on. Back this up. All right. So there we have Mercury moving on July 5th, 6th from Mercury moves into Leo in the afternoon of July 5th. And we also have on that same day the Sun making this exact square to Jupiter, 14 degrees to 14 degrees, and an exact trine to Neptune. All right. So this July 4th, 5th, 6th, but really this 5th, 6th exact. What happens here is this is the uncertainty, the unknown, the confusion, the delusion, the misdirection. You got the stage magician doing this, and you're not seeing where the other hand is going. That's a little bit of this Mercury-Neptune thing. But into this, we have the Sun, which is squaring Jupiter. That's stress, tension, creative, dynamic, conflict. But the Sun at the same time is trining Neptune. And this is the oddity about those quincunxes. Because on one hand, everything is cool. The Sun's trine to Neptune is, it's as I thought it was. Everything's dreamy. It'll be perfect. Imagination, beauty, it's all, the dream is what works. And so the Sun's trine to Neptune is absolutely perfect. But meanwhile, the Sun squares Jupiter and it's, oh my God, it's way too much. So we'll see how this unfolds. But I think we will be seeing major political events around this. Jupiter is often political. Jupiter and Saturn are both often very strongly related to political and economic things. All right, so we move on. Oh, and we skipped. No, we didn't. We're just coming to it. And that is that by July 9th, we have a full moon. That's close enough. The full moon on July 9th It's actually July 8th here in Seattle, but it's at 9:06 p.m. This is one of those confusing things, and as someone who writes daily horoscopes, these are the things that make me nuts. Why? Because I write my horoscope column for New York time, for Eastern time, and so this full moon is actually at 12:06 a.m. on the 9th. But here in Seattle, we get it at 9:06 p.m. on the 8th. Regardless of where you are and when you get it, or whether you're in Australia and you get it the following day, the fact is that this full moon is an incredibly potent and powerful full moon. First of all, it's resonating to all of this grand square stuff we've talked about. But more importantly, the full moon is lined up with Pluto, and it's opposite the Sun and Mars. So I'm assuming here that whether it's in our personal world or whether it's in the global social, political, military world, we'll see some kind of cosmic arm wrestling, pissing matches, if you will, that could turn physical. Now, I'm not saying that there will be something horrible that will happen, because I don't believe that the mechanical basis of astrology would allow one to say that. But I am saying that the energy here is really stressed. It's really stressed. And people do stupid things when their energy is stressed. And we have people who are erratic doing stupid things that certainly are capable of doing stupid things. All right, I see another 40 emails coming off. I can't help it. I try. But this full moon is an amazingly potent full moon because it's a full moon in Capricorn, which is about structure. Capricorn is about make it real. Capricorn is about stability. Capricorn is the mountain. Capricorn is climbing the mountain to the top, and you can't just run up it and go, you have to plan, you have to calculate. Capricorn is ambitious and it's calculating. It's the mountain goat that gets to the highest point of any mammal on the planet because it figures out what it's doing. So we have the moon in Capricorn, but lined up with Pluto. Here's all that power. The amassing of hidden power, of subterfuge, of stuff going on behind the curtain. And yet it's about structural stuff, because Capricorn is about structure. Capricorn's about bridges, roads, governments, banks. It's real stuff. And it's all opposite the Sun, which is lining up with Mars. And I should say here that Mars and the Sun right now are moving at about the same speed. So we can go back to, I think we can. Okay, let's go back a day at a time. We can go back to, here we are at the beginning of the month, and the Sun and Mars are about 7 degrees apart. And as we move, you can see that the two of them are traveling. Here they are 4 degrees apart, mid-July. And you can see that they're kind of moving around the same speed. They're still 4 degrees there. They're 3 degrees apart. And by the end of the month, actually, I think it's the last day of the month, or maybe not until the first. Let's just see where this goes. Yeah, no, Mars catches up. I'm sorry, the Sun catches up with Mars. See, it's still not getting there. Oh, there it is. It did. It jumped and I missed it. Let's come back. The Sun, there it is right there. On July 24th, 25th, you can see how the Sun's on one side and now it's on the other? Can you see that? So the point, though, is that the Sun and Mars are, from Earth's point of view, moving at a similar speed. Mars is the god of war. Mars is aggression. It's assertion. It's the planet of defending one's territory. And in Leo, and right now they're still both in Cancer. Let's come back to where we are because this is a big change. So here we are back around let's back up to the full moon. So here we are at the full moon, and we have the Sun and Mars in Cancer. Cancer is the sign of home and family and homeland. It's not. It makes sense that July 4th, which is our Independence Day, is in the sign of Cancer, and it's a very home, food, family-oriented holiday, maybe more so than many. But what happens is that Mars and the Sun in Cancer is kind of like passive-aggressive, because Cancer holds in, Cancer goes deep, Cancer is self-protective, and Mars wants to hit. It wants to punch back. But in Cancer, it goes, no, I'm okay. I'll get you, Mars in Cancer, and I'm not saying this of everyone who has Mars in Cancer, but the concept of Mars in Cancer is very much passive-aggressive because it is offensive by being defensive. It basically, it's like the tunnel spider that basically wants its prey to come into its home and then it eats it. So we have Mars and the Sun opposite, the full moon, opposite the Pluto moon, but it's in Cancer, and yet as the month unfolds, we have, first we need to hit July 17th. Okay, here we are. Remember I said we would come back and look at when the planets squared Uranus? Well, on July 17, Mars forms an exact square with Uranus. Do you see that? There it is right there. Can you see that? Mars, the planet of assertion, aggression, war, squares Uranus, the planet of sudden, uncontrollable. Again, this would be a danger period of time politically. On a personal level, this would be a time when one might try to figure out ways in which one can do something that's exciting, that's adrenaline producing, that is in some way, we don't want to be stupid and tempt reality by skydiving on a day when Mars is square Uranus, although I'm sure there will be people that will do it and will be fine. But it's not about tempting reality. In a way, it's about how do we move our energy? How do we shake the energy up without creating destruction? And yet, I think that on July 17th, we have the Mars squaring Uranus, and then by the 19th, by the 20th, actually, the Sun squares Uranus. And so this is kind of picking up on all of that energy. We also, by the time we get toward the end of July, obviously the Sun changes signs and moves into Leo on the 21st. They can do that right there. The Sun moves into Leo, early on the 22nd. But we have something else that's happening, and that is that as the planets will move through Leo, and we'll come and revisit this next month, as the planets move through Leo, they're going to pick up on, rather than squares, they're going to pick up on trines, first to Saturn, then to Uranus, that even though the Saturn-Uranus trine that we talked about earlier isn't exact until November again, we now have these little planets coming through that might offer some real stabilization. So I think we do get some stabilization following whatever the craziness is from the Uranus squares on July 17th through the 20th, 21st. And then by the 22nd, we have the Sun moving into Leo. And now we have the Leo new moon just hours later. And we'll see that there's the moon going from Cancer into the Leo. And there's the new moon. And the new moon in Leo is on July 23rd at 2:45 a.m., and that's Pacific Daylight Time. So that's 5:45 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And this is also, it's another very powerful lunation because the Sun and Mars are kind of traveling together. Remember, the full moon... Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Well, I just see a star, and I'm wondering if there's a relationship there that is...
Okay, so the question is that there's a star here, and I don't want to get sidetracked too much, but what we really have is this blue triangle, which is a grand trine. And that's what I mentioned before. This is the grand fire trine that offers stability. We also have a trine between Venus and Jupiter, which is a little bit past. But the other parts of the star are other colors, and so they're other geometries. So it's not quite where you're going, I don't think. But it's there. You're not convinced. You don't have to be. Certainly the stability from this grand trine is important. Also, these the square that we're still getting on the 17th through the 20th from the planets moving from Cancer into Leo are very dynamics. But I think that this new moon, the significant thing about this new moon, like the full moon, because remember, the Sun and Mars are moving at about the same rate, and that means that the full moon opposite the Sun was lined up with Pluto and opposite Mars. Now, 2 weeks later, Pluto's out of the picture, but the Sun and the Moon are still lined up with Mars. And so we're not escaping this anger, hot words, brashness. And in fact, in Cancer, it's all undercover. It's, I'm pissed, but I'm not telling you I'm pissed. I'm fine. It'll be fine. No, I'm not mad. No, really, it's okay. You're fine. But that's Cancer. Once the sun and the moon and Mars all move into Leo, it's like, I'm fucking pissed. And I'm going to get you. I'm going to do what I need to do. And in fact, it may not even be stating it. It's actually doing it. And so the point that I'm making is that July, Mars becomes an inescapable planet throughout the month. And so in Leo is dramatic. It's melodramatic. Leo is center stage. Leo is the sun shining in the middle of summer. Leo is the flowers being coaxed by the warmth and light and beauty, the warmth and light of the sun, so they show their beauty. Leo is about self-expression. It's outgoing. It's bold. It's brash. Mars and the sun and the moon, a new moon conjunct Mars in Leo, is bold, brash, angry, and doing shit. We'll see what happens, I mean, that's the weird thing about doing these things on a monthly basis, is that I actually get to look back and go, I was really wrong there. No, well, when you talk energetically without making a prediction, because I don't know what's going to happen, but the energy, the things always conform with what the energetic patterns are. That's the magic of this. And maybe some evening we'll spend an evening here talking about how this all works and why it works. Fascinating stuff. I mean, we don't know, but we could talk about it. But I don't know the answer to that. I just know that it works. All right, so the new moon on July 23rd is lined up with Mars. Normally at a new moon and full moon, we look at the aspects the planet makes, and that colors the new moon or full moon. This one with Mars there, certainly it's about planting a seed of intention, but there's action here. There's fire. There's self-defense. There's assertion. There's maybe even aggression or defense. Things heat up here quite a bit. On the other hand, there's two other very important things that are going on. And one of them, which I forgot, one of them is the fact that on the day of on the following day, we have two very important aspects. And they're both feeding into this new moon. One is the fact that Mercury, which has been kind of fiddling with this grand trine, is forming an exact trine to Uranus. Thoughts, ingenious, inventive, erratic, crazy even. And we could back that up and say that on July 19th, just very quickly backing this up, going to July 19th, you can see that the Mercury it's going an hour at a time. There we go. That on the 19th, that Mercury was exactly harmonized with Saturn. So here we have this grand trine, and what this means is that first we're getting things that are real. Communication Mercury with Saturn is that it's inarguable. We know what the truth is, we know what the facts are. By the time a week later, when that Uranus on the 23rd, 24th is harmonized or trining with Uranus, now things are crazy again. Things are crazy. Energy, thoughts, communication, news is coming out. Where it's brilliant, but it's like, what the hell? All right. The other thing that's happening here is that Venus is opposing Saturn. And this basically suggests that regardless of how much we're talking, how loudly we're talking, how many planes we have flying, how many punches we're executing, the fact is that it ain't going to happen overnight because Venus, the planet of love, and attraction and desire in Gemini is bouncing around a little bit, but opposite Saturn, Saturn says, you ain't getting it today, you need to wait. Because Saturn is the authoritative, limiting, it's the cooling planet. Saturn is the rain on the parade of Venus here. And so what this suggests is that with all the heat of Leo and all the action going on and all that stuff, that we're not going to get what we want right away. We're going to have to, I think I wrote for my horoscopes that day, that there are no shortcuts. We're going to have to take the longer path to where it is that we're going. And so it's not that the happiness or the goal or truth or whatever is elusive. It's just going to take a while to get there. The following day, we have Mercury moving from Leo into Virgo. And now we're getting the first wave of planets going into Virgo, which we'll talk about more next month when the Sun and I think Mars also move into Virgo. But remember, Leo is about the summer sun. It's about what you see is out there. It's beautiful. Everything is bright. But as the Mercury moves from Leo into Virgo, Mercury moves into its home sign. Several planets have double home signs. Mercury is at home in Gemini and in Virgo. And in Virgo, Mercury's communication is exacting. It's like if you know someone with Mercury in Virgo, they're the editor, they're the writer, they're the person who counts and is careful with their words. They're the accountant. They're the person who's basically detailed-oriented. And so we get a little bit of the flagrant outgoingness of the Leo energy as Mercury moves into Virgo, and that energy begins to close down a little bit. That's July 25th. On July 26th, we have the exact alignment of Mars and the Sun. Now remember, these two planets have been tracking all month. Mars never gets far away from the Sun this month. The two are moving at about the same rate from Earth's point of view. But on July 26th, that Sun-Mars conjunction is exact. And again, we might expect the whole idea of aggression and of words and of actions and of people just kind of getting too hot too fast, kind of coming up for us again, both personally and politically. And that kind of brings us to the end of the month. On the last day of the month, Venus, which had been moving through Gemini pretty much most of this month, on July 31st, Venus tips into Cancer, and Venus over the next few months will catch up to the Sun and pretty soon be on the other side of the Sun. But for right now, here we are off in in Leo land, and yet Venus is still kind of just coming into the first day of summer, so to speak. And so there's a part that's lagging behind. And I don't want to talk much about this now, but Venus in Gemini is very much interested in everything. When Venus moves into Cancer, the end of the month, and we'll talk about this for August, that what happens is that we pull in, our energies focus more, and we come in closer to home. How does this affect me? What do I want in my life, in my home, in my living room, in my bed, in my kitchen? It's very much more protective. There's one other thing that I wanted to bring up tonight because people have asked me about it for the last couple of months. Other astrologers have addressed this in much greater detail. I just want to mention that I do read the comments that come in on YouTube, and I just want to acknowledge that several people have asked about Saturn's conjunction with the galactic center. All right, so when we do astrology, we mostly look at the planets in relationship to the stars, to the seasons, really. And we're looking at the sun and the moon and Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. But our little solar system, with those planets going around and, a few 10,000 asteroids and another 70 or 80 or 100 objects that are out a little bit further. I mean, we can track all these things. And there are astrologers who use mathematical tools to track, tens, hundreds of things going around the sun. But the fact of the matter is that this little solar system of ours is just like one little corner of the universe. And if we drew a straight line from where the Earth is to where some planet is, and we kept going several thousand light years, we may come up to another galaxy, or to a black hole, or to a quasar, or a pulsar, or a magnetic source, or something. And what do these larger things have to do with us here on Earth, if anything? Because if as quantum physics would have us believe that everything is connected to everything, then it doesn't just matter that the moon is in a certain sign. Pluto, much farther away, matters, and maybe so does something way out there. Well, one of the things that's way out there that we know exactly where it is the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. The center of the Milky Way galaxy is at 26 degrees and 51 minutes of Sagittarius. So that if here on Earth, if I looked at that point that we astrologers call 26 degrees of almost 27 degrees of Sagittarius, and I drew a straight line from here on Earth to that point, I kept going, that point would end me up in the black hole that is the center of this entire galaxy. So what we have is over these last months, and I'm going to just do this going back to a month at a time. So we're going back to, all right, let's do this a week at a time now. All right, so here's Saturn back at the end of 2016, and Saturn moves by January, February, by March. That Saturn, we're only looking at this planet, we're not looking at any of the other noise. By March 2nd, that Saturn is at 26 degrees and 50 minutes of Sagittarius. So in March, Saturn lined up with the center of our galaxy. And then it went on and then it turned retrograde, and then by May 10th, it was back at that same degree. And from Earth's point of view, it continued retrograding all the way back to 20 degrees of Sagittarius, turned direct again, or turning direct. And that Saturn will line up with the galactic center for the third and final time, November 22nd. So what does this mean? Again, that's the mechanics, that's the science. The art says that the center of the galaxy is almost like the sun of our own little solar system. There's something very important about that point, and I'm not sure that I know what it is. I'm just saying, though, that when a planet lines up with the center of the galaxy, it's channeling more energy that's out beyond this little place that we have going. It's another layer of importance, if you will, and I'm just layering that on top of everything else that seems to be important at this time. So, that brings me to the point at which I'm going to try in a sentence to make sense out of this whole thing, which I'm not sure I can. But the fact of the matter is that July is a month where we have a lot of noise in the form of anger, suppression, and control coming to the surface. And we have a bit of confusion toward the early part of the month with the Jupiter-Neptune quincunx that makes it difficult for us to really know what the truth is. And I think more than anything, it's incumbent upon each and every one of us, both in the global national political scene and in our individual relationships, to do our best that we can to not go off the handle on something that we think is the truth. Not that it isn't, it's just that we don't know. And so I think it's important for us to have tolerance, but at the same time, it's also really important that we pay attention to how Mars can get so heated up that we can do something that we may regret. I read something recently that was two people talking, or a therapist, and said, and as this person had anger issues, and the therapist said, take this plate and drop it. The person dropped it, it shattered into a lot of pieces. And he goes, now say I'm sorry. And the person said, I'm sorry. And he goes, what's the plate doing? It's still broken. You know, this idea that we can just get angry and do bad shit, whether it's hit someone, bomb someone, yell at someone, whatever it is, and think that it's okay because that's what we felt, is kind of, I think, one of the background lessons of July. I think that there's really a sense of being mature and being able to feel things, but know when it's not appropriate to push the envelope and take something too far that you will regret later on. Understanding also that in August we have these eclipses coming up, and I think a lot of what's been going on for the past 6 months or even longer will come to a head then, and it will remain for us to see that at that point in time. Thank you all for your indulgence. You're you're showing up and being here. Sometimes I know this is a lot of information. Thank you all on the internet. Please share widely. And thank you, Soul Food, and Anya, and Jordan, and whoever else is back there. Thank you, guys. And that's it. Thank you.